Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me, my longstanding cohort, Clay Jones.
Evening.
Our guest tonight, a local attorney, Tonya Rolland.
Good evening.
First, I want to welcome all of you that managed to follow us to our new date and time, and be sure and tell all of your friends that we're no longer on Wednesdays, but we have moved to alternate Mondays at 8 o'clock instead of 8:30. So I hope not too many people missed this week's show and that you've all caught up with us again in 2 weeks. I want to start tonight with some breaking local news, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of information about it yet. But apparently this afternoon in northwest Houston, the police pulled over a large semi-truck that they allege was transporting drugs. There was a shootout. One man in the cab of the truck supposedly was injured. He's alleged to have been a confidential informant for the police. Clayton, I think you had a couple of other details.
Yeah, they said that there was a shootout there. The one person from the truck was killed, and the police officer was wounded.
Okay. That was what we got from the 6 o'clock news broadcast this evening. If any of you have any further information on that, you might call in and share it with us. We'll have the number up on the screen in just a moment. And remember that this is primarily your show. We welcome your questions and comments. You can either call them in live tonight, or if you're watching us on YouTube or through the internet, you may make your question or comment an email to me at the address shown on the screen. I will answer you back directly, and we may use your message on the next show. So tonight, Ms. Rolland will be telling us about some of her experiences as a defense attorney in some drug cases, and Clay will be filling us in on his major expedition to what conference was it?
Drug Policy Forum.
The Drug Policy
Alliance.
Drug Policy Alliance, and that was in California,
Los
right?
Angeles.
Okay. So that's what we'll be doing. And first, let's find out from Tonya of what kind of experiences she's had in the world of drug law.
Well, I'm a former Harris County prosecutor, and I have been practicing in private practice defense now for almost 3 years. I handle a lot of drug cases. I have found that in almost every drug case that I come across, that there is an illegal search. Okay. And I think that a large problem, whether you are pro-drug laws or not, is that the Constitution isn't being upheld, and the searches are botched.
Well, as someone whose specialty is much more prohibition laws in general as opposed to just drug laws, it's my observation that looking back at least 300 years now, one thing that is guaranteed to happen with prohibition laws is that you get either corrupt or ineffective law enforcement.
Absolutely. I think that people are getting abused. I think that they're getting bullied. Yeah. I think that a lot of people that, most of us would not consider bad people are spending time in jail. We're spending a lot of money on appointing attorneys and on law enforcement, and I don't think that it's successful.
Yeah. Clayton, before we go on with this, you were mentioning something about a conviction in the local courts today. What happened there?
A Houston police officer by the name of Leslie Atkins was found guilty today for escorting 7 kilos across the county while he was on the job in uniform and had a gun on his hip.
Okay.
And he was also convicted for conspiracy, extortion, and his traveling date is
Sentencing date is
February 2nd. I'm sorry.
Well,
I
now,
had that off.
an interesting thing here is he was tried in state court. But if this had been a federal charge with the firearm involved, what kind of penalties would he be looking at?
Absolutely. Well, it's up to the federal government whether they pick up the state charge.
Right,
And
yes.
so it depends what they would have chosen to pick up.
Yeah.
And so it is possible that it wasn't necessary for them to pick up. And so I would need to know more specifics of the case.
Normally speaking, 5 kilograms, and I'm assuming that would be cocaine,
Yes, it was.
is too small for a U.S. attorney
Right.
to dirty his hands with.
Right.
But what kind of enhancement would there be for having a firearm while conducting a drug delivery?
Well, obviously, if you're in state court and there's a firearm, there's already an enhancement. There is a weapons enhancement. So he was already subject to that.
Yes, they said that his minimum sentence will be 10 years, and he can get 10 years on each offense, and it's 12. So at his age, he may be looking at life in prison.
Potentially.
Forgive me for being cynical, but I would bet both of you that his sentence will be somewhere near the bottom end of that range.
And I agree with you. I think that, unfortunately, police officers that aren't doing their job and are taking advantage of their role as police officers are probably not sentenced as harshly as the drug dealers that don't have their
So we
duties.
have dual standards here in our court systems.
Of course.
Completely.
But there's something else involved, and we can draw a parallel here to what's alleged to have been going on at Penn State University with the charges against the assistant coach for child molestation. And what seems to have been the primary motivation institutionally there was keep it quiet and don't embarrass the institution.
Yes.
And I think we see a lot of that in play when we have cops misbehaving with any kind of drug violation.
It gets pushed under the carpet,
Yes.
and you seldom actually hear of those cases.
Yeah.
Everybody should start reading Stop the Drug War every week, and you can keep well up on that, on how well the police are doing.
Yeah. Well, what kinds of problems do you find with police searches in drug cases?
I think I handle a lot of traffic stops cases. In the traffic stop, there's generally not true reasonable suspicion to stop the vehicles. And the officers are profiling. Racial profiling. They are stopping people that they recognize. A lot of my clients tend to get picked on based on
Repeatedly,
officers that absolutely that know their name once they pull them over, know that maybe they are on probation, trying to turn themselves around so they never get a second chance. The reasonable suspicion, if I can see that the officer did have reasonable suspicion, then there tends to be a problem with probable cause for the actual arrest. It's very common for my clients to come in and tell me that they didn't consent to the search, but the offense report says that there was a consent for the search, and then it becomes their word against my clients.
When a car gets stopped, what actually makes it probable cause for a police officer to say, "Can I check your car after I've given you a ticket?"
They have to be able to articulate a reason to search. There can be consent to search. With marijuana, those cases are the most common.
The smell.
Yes. It is law in Texas that if the officer says that he smells an odor of marijuana, then he legally can search your car without any further cause.
Even though if at the end of it, they find absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
No paraphernalia, no nothing.
Yeah.
Just see you bye. I imposed on you, but see you bye.
Absolutely. They can keep you on the side of the road. They have you detained, and until they see fit to release you, you have to stand there.
Yeah. Now, the other side of that is, does someone who has been pulled over have to consent to a search?
Absolutely not. And I tell people all of the time that if I'm pulled over on a traffic stop, I know there are no illegal drugs in my car. However, I will not consent. It is my constitutional right to not consent unless there is a reason the officer should not be in my car. And for me, I would rather stand on the side of the road and be there all afternoon if necessary, just to uphold those rights for everyone else.
That's right. And but as you say, there's a problem of, it's amazing how often the word no is heard as yes.
Absolutely. And
Is there any way to protect yourself against that?
I tell my clients to, just stand up for their rights, not to consent to search and not to consent to any statements, and we'll have to fight it from there. But, we have a right not to. And if all of us are standing up for those rights, we're better off. The problem is some patrol cars have videos, but it is up to the officer whether or not they turn the video on during the stop, and they're only turning them on during DWIs.
Well, that's something I've been thinking about for some time. I mentioned it to some friends on the internet a couple of weeks ago. Technology is in place so that a little lipstick camera could be hooked on the shoulder strap of a policeman's uniform. Wi-Fi could send it to a locked-up recorder where he couldn't get to it. And there is absolutely no reason why every hour of every policeman's shift should not be recorded, and he should not be allowed to testify unless the video's there to back him up.
The video's evidence. I believe, I agree with you, and we should have all of the evidence available.
Yes.
And at a minimum, these vehicles that have cameras, the cameras should be on anytime there's a stop.
Yeah. Now, I think in some states, I'm not sure about this, but I think that in some states, that when the policeman flips on his blinker lights, the dashboard camera automatically comes on.
Really?
That would be one way to do it. I'm getting confusing messages over my monitor about whether there's a phone call or not. Apparently, there is not. So anyway, what's probably the most outrageous case you've seen?
Outrageous. It depends what area and of law you're talking about.
Okay.
Having been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, I've seen both sides, and I've seen, a lot of injustice against clients. I think my problem with the criminal justice system is the adult system is it's based on punishment, and it's not based on any type of rehabilitation the way the juvenile system is.
Well, now, Clayton, you just brought up a new program that went into effect in some Washington.
In Washington State, they just brought up a new program they started. The program has the police officer has the discretion to arrest or not to arrest. And if it's on minor drug charges, no violence involved. Minor alcohol, no violence involved. they can have the police officer has the option to give the suspect an opportunity to go to rehab, and they go to rehab for a certain amount of days, and they come out and there's no arrest and no record.
Oh, when Clayton told me about this, I just totally hit the ceiling.
It's appalling.
Yeah. Tell us why you think it's appalling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For one, it's giving the officer way too much discretion. The officer, is not an attorney, is not a doctor.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to pressure people, especially young people that are scared into rehab that don't need to be there.
And we don't send anyone to a mental hospital without an adjudicatory hearing in front of a judge with witnesses. We have a
Absolutely.
phone call. No, we don't.
Nope.
I hope maybe they'll call back. But no, this is very much... There was a famous novel that came out of the Soviet Union called something about the cancer ward. And during the worst part of the Soviet repression, the government would take anyone they felt like was dangerous and put them into a mental hospital, and they, in effect, would simply disappear. No problems. And to me, this letting the policeman on his sole authority on the street with no supervision and no training admit someone into, and let's face it, rehabilitation is a psychiatric facility, is just a long way away from what the Constitution says. Well, let's see if maybe they hooked. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello? Well, our phone seems to be messed up. We'll keep trying again later. This might be a good time to give you my book review of the week, and then we'll continue our discussion. Tonight, I want to mention This Is Your Country on Drugs by Ryan Grimm. He's primarily a magazine journalist. This book is, it's somewhat uneven in quality, but a interesting read. I recommend it because it's one of the very, very few books I have found that is a history to a little bit of depth anyway of drug laws and drug law enforcement between 1970, when Nixon started the war on drugs, and 2009, when he finished writing this book. His own personal interest started out and was primarily in LSD and the psychedelics, but he gives a fair amount of coverage to both marijuana and cocaine. It's kind of a fun read, and I believe I saw it in paperback last month, so give it a try. It's time to take a break, and we'll be back with our guest, Tonya Rolland, in just a minute.
Well, maybe we're not doing a break right now.
Now he's... Well, we...
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
We're back. I hope they've got the telephone problems fixed, so keep trying to give us a call. We've been talking with Tonya Rolland, a lawyer here in Houston who does some criminal defense work, including work on drug cases. If you, from what you see in the pits where the whole mess goes down, if you could do one thing to make the drug war or drug laws more fair and more applicable to the people involved, what would you do?
I think that I would make, well, it also depends to me what type of drugs you're talking about. For me personally, I believe that marijuana should be legalized. I think that we spend way too much money on fighting marijuana. And so I would treat marijuana different than I would treat other drugs, cocaine and meth. Those drugs I believe are addictive. I believe those clients of mine generally need help that they don't get.
I want to interrupt here for just a second. I try to do this anytime anyone mentions meth. And I point out that meth is a legal drug. It's sold under the brand name Desoxyn and is prescribed regularly for children with ADHD.
Not at all.
Yes, and they're fed the drugs in our drug-free areas.
Absolutely. I agree.
You know, that's one thing that boils me. I live close to the little town of Meadow Place that's just on the west edge of Houston in Fort Bend. And as you drive into this little town, there's a sign that says, "This is a gun-free and drug-free community."
Of course it is.
Yes. Why is it then that every policeman in that city has a gun on his hip? In Texas, a state where probably a fourth of the homes have a hunting rifle or a shotgun in them, that doesn't sound very drug-free or gun-free. And I'll bet that if I went into the police station or city hall and searched around, I would find in pockets and desk drawers and purses several bottles of aspirin and probably some prescription drugs and all sorts of OTCs like Beano. So how can you say it's drug-free?
Well, I think it's a myth, and for any community to think that they're drug or gun-free, obviously.
Yeah. So, well, you know, the latest general nationwide poll showed that now 50% of the adults think marijuana should be legalized. So maybe things will happen.
I believe it will. I believe it's a form of prohibition, and that it will definitely come full circle. Again, I'm not sure how long that will take. But
now, out at the conference, I was talking to a lady from Portugal, and she was a part of their program over there they have legalized drugs, personal use. Today, 11 years later, they have 40% less drug addicts than they did when the program started. They have places where they can go shoot up. There is an attendant there that can make sure they don't overdose. But if they say that they want rehab, they're brought out to it immediately.
Absolutely.
No waiting 6 weeks, 2 weeks. They're there, they get the treatment that they wanted. They have 40% less drug addicts injection than they did 11 years ago when they started this program.
Well, when you punish a disease over and over and you don't treat it, then nothing ever changes. And because our criminal justice system is a punishment system and not rehabilitation, we continue to punish and, cultivate drug abuse. We're not fixing the problem.
It's like we have done absolutely nothing to fireproof buildings. And then instead we send the fire department out to beat on anyone who lived in the house that burned down. It's kind of the way the drug laws work. So, I've got another thing, and I'll get into it now. Let's see if the phone's working now. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Buford, it's Dean.
Yes, Dean.
Hey, Dean.
Hi,
How are you
Dean.
guys? Hey, I'm the first one, right, on the new slide.
Yes, you are. You found us.
Well, that's good to know. I just wanted to touch base with you guys.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned early on about the shootout there over on, was it Hollister?
I guess that's where it was, yes.
Yeah, well, what I've been able to find so far, there were some cops with an informant riding around following this truck, suspected drug couriering truck, I suppose.
Yeah.
And as they were following it, another car pulled up. Some gentlemen got out, started shooting at the suspect truck, I guess trying to hijack whatever load was on board.
Yeah.
In the shootout, a deputy was wounded, and the informant was killed.
Okay.
And that's about all I've been able to gather at this point. I wanted to also point out, Stop the Drug War. Clay was just talking about them. They had an issue tonight talking about Obama has pardoned 3 pot prisoners, if you will,
Yes.
and 1 crack prisoner. He's still way below, down there at 5% or whatever of what Obama or the others have.
Well, his numbers of pardons are down low, but are his number of drug pardons down in relationship to theirs?
Well, I would think it's probably a high percentage.
Yeah,
of his
because
pardons are, drug crime related. But I think the fact of the matter is they
because
are just not enough to count for much.
Yeah. So,
Well, they said that George Bush at this time in his presidency had pardoned 200 people, and Clinton had pardoned 459 at
Yes,
this point in their term.
what I'm asking is how many of those were for drug offenses?
They didn't break it down.
We know that Bush's included, for instance, Scooter Libby,
Oh, yeah.
and we know that one of Clinton's was a major Arkansas businessman. But frankly, I'd rather see the woman who had her sentence commuted, who was doing, 24 years 20 years for delivery of how much coke?
I don't know how much it was. It didn't. I don't believe it specified how much.
Okay, but
Just yesterday, I got a couple of letters from some prisoners at the Estelle unit.
Yeah.
And they were talking about one gentleman had been busted twice, and then the third time they caught him, he had 2 rocks of crack cocaine. He's now been behind bars some 17 years, a life sentence. And, he's starting to get cancer, and, he's got some STDs and whatever, and, he's becoming just an enormous burden to the state, all because of our paranoia over some, cocaine extract.
Yeah. Well, now, that brings up something else, and here my statistics are maybe 10 years old, but I have not seen anything that changed them. At that time, the state had quit testing prison inmates because they were coming back with test results of about a 40% HIV positive rate in the prisons and over 30% of hepatitis C. And also, the statistics at that time showed that a male in custody, either local jails or state prisons, had a better than 20% chance of being raped during the first week he was locked up. So by bringing up this HIV thing with the men in prison, that's another one of those dirty little secrets that isn't swept under the rug.
And it
So they don't
exists.
get treated.
That's right. And mentioned 2 rocks of cocaine. That's worth what, $10 today on the street?
Maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
So that reminds me of the old days in England where you could get hanged for stealing a penny's worth of bread.
Yeah, and it's just so outrageous that, you know, these laws were concocted to end the drug war, to bring it, you know, to where the price of drugs would be so high that people would just quit, you know, some sort of pipe dream. and people have begun to realize that pipe dream is never going to come true, and that we have to find a better way to do this. It's just a shame so many politicians are so shaking in their boots, so afraid to bring the subject to the fore.
You know, we've got places in this country that are so much more progressive than here in the Midwest. You have New England, which is a hotbed for normalizing marijuana. You've got Washington State, Colorado, and California that look like they're going to do or try to do some form of legalization. If I personally think that if 2 of the even small states have legalization come across, the war is over.
Well, it's also, the fact of the matter is, even the Texas politicians know the truth of this matter. And again, they're quivering in their boots because they are so afraid of losing votes by speaking this glaring and obvious truth. And it's just a case of us, their constituents, having the courage to face them, to contact them, to make them deal with this reality.
You know, come next November, I personally believe that all these politicians that we have in our state that have been in office, they all need to be elected out and start with a whole new bunch because they can't do as bad as the ones we have there now. They're really not on our side.
I believe it's...
I'd like to relay a couple more thoughts. I know you guys got a fine guest there, and I have a question for her when I get done here.
Okay.
But I wanted to point out, folks, on my most recent Cultural Baggage show, I had Mr. Eric Sterling of the Criminal Justice Policy Foundation. It's a great discussion, a lot of it dealing with the mandatory minimums, which we were talking about there earlier. And then I also have a great speech, which I'm sure Clay heard out at that Reform Conference. Ira Glasser, former head of the ACLU, president of the Drug Policy Alliance, talking about the fact that insofar as winning the drug war, we will never win. We can only make progress, and there will be these diehards coming behind us trying to take back what we have gained. But we cannot stop this. It's just like civil rights and women's rights and all the basic human civil rights. You have to keep fighting because these people that make the money, you know, the pharmaceutical companies, the big ones, make more money than God himself. But these cartels are paying our politicians surreptitiously to keep this going. And we have to stand for truth. The drug war has no basis in reality. My guest this coming week on Century of Lies is going to be Beto O'Rourke, former city councilman in El Paso, Susie Bird, who's a current councilman in El Paso, and their book, Dealing Death and Drugs, the Big Business of Dope in the U.S. and Mexico. That's going to be actually Sunday, 6:30. You can hear it on KPFT. It's 90.1 FM here in Houston.
Dean, Beto O'Rourke, wasn't he the city councilman in El Paso that introduced a resolution calling for the city to send a resolution to the federal government saying the war on drugs needed to be ended, or at least discussed.
Indeed. He was very instrumental in that. He's actually quit his job as a councilman. He's now running for U.S. representative.
Well, good for him. So.
Yes, indeed. And the question for the lawyer there, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about how these cops go about getting into the car. You know, the way they finagle the truth and get people to, well, I guess so. And I guess the point is, in New York City, Ira Glasser pointed out that the knowledge that you don't have to allow your pants to be searched, that you don't have to put your stuff out on the table, was not known by the public in New York, that the mayor and the police chief just kind of kept that quiet. And I guess the fact is, we don't have to consent to these searches. We can just say, well, what do we do to fight these cops who try to manipulate us into agreeing with them?
Absolutely.
I'll get my answer off there,
Okay.
and thank you all so much.
Thank
you later,
you, Dean. And you can also check Dean on his website, which is Clayton.
Drug Truth.
Okay.
.net.
.net. Okay. Oh, he mentioned something that I want to bring up, which is almost but not quite off topic. And this is, as I'm sure most of you know, every 10 years the Constitution requires us to conduct a census and to rearrange our political districts to select representatives on the basis of that census. That has been through most of our history in the hands of the political parties, with the party dominant in one state. Gerrymandering, it's called, to give them the largest edge in representation. Texas just went through its redistricting. There has been a federal suit filed, and the federal courts have said it looks like it's unallowable under the federal law, and have imposed temporary districts for the next election, and have done so in Houston, Harris County, for the Harris County districts this next election. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes.
Yes, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. Yes,
All right.
I have a comment.
Okay. Would you go ahead and make your comment, please? Turn your television down.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
The comment I have was about being pulled over.
Yes.
A person being pulled over with like a marijuana cigarette.
And?
And, they get, instead of being given a fine, they get taken off to jail and possibly lose their job. And
Yeah.
so.
Well, and this is something I'm sure Tonya can comment more about than I can.
Absolutely. The law currently is that any usable quantity of marijuana is a Class B misdemeanor. It's a punishment range of $2,000 up to 6 months in jail. The case law does not state exactly what a usable quantity is.
Well, back 45 years ago when I first started practicing, the Court of Criminal Appeals held that some marijuana seeds in the bottom of a Bull Durham sack was a usable quantity, as was the residue left in a marijuana pipe.
Absolutely. And now the courts, anything that they can link to marijuana now is considered a usable quantity. And so, unfortunately, they're not arresting for crack pipe residue anymore, and they're giving tickets on crack pipe cases, but they're actually arresting
Giving tickets?
for cocaine paraphernalia. But he brought up something else, and you also brought it up there. Every time you talk to someone in law enforcement, they poo-poo and say no one gets sent to jail for marijuana anymore.
And that's just
But
not true.
even if that's true with what he said, they still get arrested. they still go to jail, and unless they can make bond, they're held in jail until a trial date. They lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance, they may get kicked out of their home. Now, state law allows for the police to use citations like traffic tickets for minor misdemeanors, including marijuana possession. Why doesn't Houston and Harris County do that?
I think it goes back to what I believe the first caller was trying to tell the audience is we need to, as voters, start paying attention to who we're putting into office, and we need to elect people into office that are going to listen, that we do want laws where you can be given a ticket.
I kind of
I think we have another call.
Oh, go ahead.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes. What exactly are the laws governing the use of audio and video recorders on cell phones? Now that virtually everyone has one, what exactly are your rights involving recording either your interaction with a police officer or you're witnessing a police officer with a third person?
Oh, I wish I had my favorite guest here tonight. We frequently have Ray Hill here, and I'm sure you've run into Ray Hill's name.
And I've dealt firsthand with this situation. I've had clients charged with interference with public duties because there has been an incident where they are recording the officer and they are using their cell phone and they're getting arrested for it.
Well, Ray Hill he claims to be retired, but that's a lie. An activist in Houston who 30 years ago took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court held that he had a First Amendment right to ask questions of a police officer who was harassing someone. If you've been looking at any of the news with the 99%ers for the past month or so, you'll notice that most or a large part of that video comes from cell phones. You do not have the right to physically interfere with a policeman going about his duty, but golly gee, if you want to stand there a few feet away and hold your phone up and tape the whole damn thing, that's your constitutional right.
And it is your constitutional right, but I am seeing people getting arrested over and over for it.
Again. And if they're lucky, they get arrested without getting their head butted and their phone cracked to the ground and broken.
It's at your own risk to exercise that constitutional right.
Now, it's one thing.
Risk.
Well, it's one nice thing for us to sit safely behind this table and talk about exercising your constitutional right.
It's very different.
But let's take someone who is taping on a cell phone a marijuana arrest and who gets busted for interfering with the officer, goes to trial and ultimately gets an acquittal and walks out a free man. How much is it going to cost him along the way to do it?
Absolutely. And the number one question from my clients when I get dismissals is, how do I get all of the money back? Is there anybody that can I sue them for doing this to me? And it's no.
Well, I want to come back to that after we listen to this caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I was wondering, did you see the video that of the judge disciplining his daughter with the belt?
Yeah.
Yes.
Said she released it because he took away her Mercedes or something like that. And now I hear the ex-wife is filing where he can't have custody or visit their 10-year-old.
Yeah.
It's like they're painting a picture of him to be this bad guy. I'm not sure how everybody else feels, but it's something I noticed.
Yeah. Well, I can give you my own opinion. Is from watching that video, he was not disciplining his daughter. He was venting his own anger, rage, and frustration.
I agree. And there's a difference.
Yeah. Yep. But as you were saying, your client who has spent a large sum of money, who has possibly lost a job or at least missed some time off from work, who has had to go through the agony of a trial, ask, can I get it back? Now, It's awfully hard to prove a situation, but you know what I'm thinking now that I just sit here listening to it? As long ago as the Ray Hill case was decided, as many other cases have been decided and promulgated on citizens' rights to observe, comment, and record, it looks to me like any prosecutorial office that accepts a charge like that, any city police department that allows its officers to arrest people on charges like that, is certainly acting outside the color of their official duties, and there's bound to be a civil rights violation there.
Right, and potentially personally liable.
Yeah, because this is not one where the policeman's acting under the color of law.
Absolutely not. I agree with you.
This is something that has been so far outside of his duties and so strongly roped off from police interference that all of you civil rights attorneys out there listening, please, Mr. ACLU, please, Mr. Southern Poverty Law Center, please, all of the rest of my friends, let's see some good, solid case law on this issue developed.
Can we get another call?
Oh, we do? Okay.
Make some comments in that.
Hello, can you turn your TV down, please? Hello, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, what are y'all talking about? Drugs, crime, and politics?
Yes, sir.
Yes, what is that all about?
Okay, we're just a show that every 2 weeks we discuss some of the problems surrounding the issues of drug use and drug laws in our society.
Yes, I got a couple of comments. I think you should not worry about trying to do the drug stuff, get more about getting those people, those bad people out there, rapists, murderers.
Yes.
Okay.
Mention more of those stuff instead of drugs.
Okay. You know, you raise an interesting point there. According to some statistics that I have seen, around a quarter of all arrests across the United States are for drug offenses. Somewhere between 25% and 40% of all of the jail and prison inmates are there for drug offenses. That doesn't leave a whole lot of time, effort, and money to spend on robbers, murderers, and rapists.
Or room to keep them in jail.
Right.
Well, no, what we do is we rent a jail in Louisiana.
And we ship them over there.
And we ship
Yep.
them over there. They can't converse with their attorneys. They can't
Or
visit with their
as
families.
their attorney, I have to drive 3 hours to go visit my client, which I've had to do on several occasions
Yeah.
when my clients have been shipped out of Harris County.
And does Harris County pay your mileage?
No, they don't. And, you know, but if I talk to them over the phone,
Yeah.
then my call's recording.
Well, let me ask you this, and I honestly don't know what the answer would be. Have you or anyone else filed a motion asking the court to order the sheriff's department to bring your client to you for a conference?
I haven't. You can successfully get them bench warranted back in some circumstances, but I haven't. It hasn't occurred to me to file a motion like that, and so it would be worth it to consider that in the future. It hasn't happened more recently that the county
as I say,
inmates
that's just off the top of my
but
head.
it's not.
I've
I
not
don't
done
think
any research, so I'm not advocating it. I'm just wondering if it's a possibility.
It would be interesting to look into. I know bench warranting has been the most useful tool and the quickest.
Well, I can just visualize the county court talking about the budget meeting if they realize they've got to run a shuttle back and forth.
Back and forth.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Hello, caller.
With what you're talking about, in the possession of drugs,
Yes.
in the Constitution of the United States, it really doesn't say anything about possession of drugs. There's really not supposed to be any criminal offense towards that. And you should have the freedom to ingest or have possession of narcotics in your body, but now they're testing when they arrest people when they come into jail. What do you think about that?
Okay. Well, I'll let you start out since you represent the people that get tested.
As far as, they're not, to my knowledge, testing people as they're being arrested. There's no, unless they're driving and it's driving while intoxicated, that there's some concern as to whether someone's operating a motor vehicle. But
some cities, at least on felony arrests,
okay.
routinely test everyone as part of the booking process.
Well, they're not doing that here in Harris County.
Yeah.
And so I'm not real sure what potentially is happening elsewhere. But while I know that while people are on bond, they are subject to drug testing at any point. There are a few courts where I've had young clients come in and place them on a pretrial diversion or a deferred adjudication, and they've been honest about whether or not they would test clean. And their honesty wasn't always rewarded. And
I was rewarded with free room and board.
Yes.
Well, he brought up, and I have heard several people bring this up, as the Constitution protects what we put in our bodies. I've spent a long time, including many years, teaching at least parts of the Constitution, and it really doesn't work that way. As long as Congress can justify what they do with one of the express powers they're given in Article 1, and as long as the government doesn't directly violate any of the protections in the Bill of Rights or those surrounding it, then the government can do a lot of things. This idea that the government can't interfere with me in any way is a real radical overstatement of some extreme libertarian views of what a government, not a constitutional government, should be. So be careful about trying to stretch things too far. There's one other issue I wanted to bring up, and while Tonya's here, will be a good time to do it. I pulled a news story off the internet about a police raid that took place in Atlanta yesterday. East Point police shooting. 7 at the scene of the shooting were charged with misdemeanors. The police, in a SWAT team maneuver, broke into a house on a drug raid. Gunfire broke out. Several people were shot. And the police responded by charging the shooting victims with violating a local ordinance for running a dive. Now, in 50 years in the law, I have never heard of a law against running a dive.
I've been to some dives.
Yes. And Clayton had some numbers earlier about how many people were killed during these kinds of raids.
So far this year, it's 46.
Okay. I know that from what I follow, at least once a month, there's at least one story of a police SWAT-style military raid into a residence, and frequently it's the wrong residence, where shooting results and bystanders get injured or killed. In one case, an 85-year-old grandmother. In a couple of cases, infants have been shot. In one case, 2 of the family's dogs were shot. Frankly, SWAT-type commando raids breaking into a private residence to get Osama bin Laden may be one thing. But to try to use them on citizens to find a little bitty bag of marijuana just doesn't fly. Police departments have mottos like defend and protect or preserve and protect. Nowhere does their motto say bust the door down, tear the hell out of the house, and shoot anyone inside.
And I don't think that's what the laws were intended for. I think it's a necessary force.
It seems to me like, if I remember back when...
we've got just a couple of minutes, and there's a caller waiting. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I called earlier, and
Okay.
you gave an answer to my question.
Okay.
But you gave an answer that said that Congress can act if they feel necessary to pass a law.
Yeah.
However, the Constitution specifically states that they have limited powers, and they should not overstep those powers.
That's right.
And personal freedoms of individuals are more important.
Okay,
than
we can't get really off into the theory of the Constitution, but the basic answer is that if you take one of the powers Congress is given in Article 1, and if Congress can make a reasonable logical connection with the law they're trying to pass, carrying out one of those express powers, and if it does not directly violate one of the protections in the Bill of Rights, then that is a constitutional law. We're down to the last 2 minutes. You guys, either one of you want to make a last statement?
Very quickly, just going back to making sure that we just educate everybody. You do not have to consent to a search. Yeah. You do not have to empty your pockets. You definitely just need, if you have any questions, contact an attorney that you trust.
Yes.
To educate you on those laws, and that's our own individual way of upholding the Constitution.
I think I have to add to this that this stuff is complicated, it's hairy, and if you try to do it without a lawyer, you're going to get yourself in a mess.
Absolutely.
Now, where do we stand in getting the Public Defender's Office up and running here in Harris County?
The Public Defender's Office is actually, it is very exciting right now. They're doing already open. They have cases in misdemeanor only mental health.
Okay.
They have, I believe, are about to start some juvenile cases or may already be in there and are about to take on some felony cases, but it is very exciting for Harris County.
Yes, it is.
And I think that it's, even for private criminal defense attorneys such as myself, it's going to be a good resource.
Well, it's going to take a load off of your pack. You were telling me earlier a couple you were doing pro bono just because they needed to be done. Last thoughts, Clayton? We didn't get to your trip to California at all.
That's okay. We have another show in a couple of weeks. It's just, boy. The police, she's absolutely correct. We've had our forefathers have died over our privacy rights.
Yeah.
And just to honor them, I would never allow a policeman to search my car.
Ever.
Ever.
But when you turn them down, do so politely and non-confrontationally.
Absolutely.
And we have had a very exciting discussion. You're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you. It was very nice to be here.
And as Clayton and I always say at the end of the broadcast, write your congressmen, your representatives, do it often, and do it on paper with a stamp, because that way they'll read it. Thank you. I hope you found us all on Monday, and get the word out that we're now on Mondays at 8 o'clock, and we'll see you again 2 weeks from today. And have a happy Thanksgiving.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories and
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. Damn prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
if
we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.